Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. The Cyclocross World Cup is starting in Antwerp this weekend. We will be taking a look ahead at the first round there, and with me here to do that as always is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
In case you missed it, which is probably impossible if you listen to this podcast, the Cyclocross World Cup has been reformed this year. It's the second time in 5 years that the format has been changed. So in 2020, the World Cup was expanded from typically being 8 or 9 rounds to 16 rounds. The goal was that more rounds would result in more countries being visited. Now the World Cup has been reduced. They're right in the middle between the old and the old new format, if that makes sense. So we're at 12 races now and they've all been condensed. So the idea of every Sunday you turn on cyclocross, it's a World Cup, has been abandoned. We're having double weekend, something I encourage. And the reasons behind this reform are to attract more big names to the series, because riders complained that if it was so spread out they couldn't do the full series. So now they hope that all the big names will commit to the full World Cup calendar. They also hope that more big names like Van Aert and Van der Poel and Pietersen would commit to the full series while doing a road season. Well, the last part, that already is proven to not be true. We know that Pietersen is only going to be starting her season in Namur. Van Aert and Van der Poel don't care about the World Cup at all. The only thing they care about is the world title, and even that is a question mark if Van Aert really cares about that. But about the first part, Issam, do you think we'll see this year riders like Thibaut Nys, Laurens Sweeck, Eli Iserbyt, Lars van der Haar commit to the full World Cup series, or will we still see the same as last year?
I still think that we will see some scenarios play out similar to what we have seen last year. I think that it depends on how much it will be and how much of it will we notice, because obviously when someone is a little bit higher placed in the classification, we will notice it a little bit sooner and it will be a bigger story, obviously. But I do feel that because there are a lot of World Cups in a very short amount of time, and normally there will always be one or two races that will be picked out and they will be left aside, and they will not race it for their own benefits, and which is completely understandable, by the way. But I feel that could definitely be the case again this season, and if it does happen, I'm really curious to hear what the explanation will be of Flanders Classics and the organizers of the World Cup.
I agree. We'll still see the same scenario and they'll probably be mad about it, but to me it just feels like this is something that looks good behind the desk. I can't help but think that the financial aspect plays a major role in these decisions. So it is the most lucrative time to organize a cyclocross race in December because people are off work, the bigger names do more cyclocross races, that all adds up. I can't help but think that for the World Cup, it's important to be in that period as well. And they just think about the things at the bottom of the line, the numbers, the figures. They need to be green, they need to be positive. But they don't actually think about the implications, because when do riders skip the World Cups? The riders don't skip the first World Cups of the season. We saw them, maybe not in the US last year, but they raced Maasmechelen and they raced after the European Championships. Most of them did. Of course, there was that Thibaut Nys debacle that he didn't race. I think it was Troyes, but he did race the day before, and that was the whole thing with Lapartient saying, oh, riders that do that should be suspended. Back then I said Lapartient is out of touch, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's just putting oil on the fire. And I feel that this reform is the same. It's naive to think that Van Aert and Van der Poel will start their cyclocross season earlier to focus on the World Cup. It's naive to think that if you condense the World Cup, 12 races, into a super short period, that everyone will race every round if you make your calendar as stupid as this is. I think this is a stupid calendar. We're going to organize races in the time that for the past 15 years, riders are going to train in Spain. Bart Wellens has already said that his team is not committing to the World Cups in early December because they're doing a training camp, because they have to. They have to be fresh, they have to be fit for the Christmas period. You know it's going to be a failure, and you know who's going to be on the short side of the stick, because again, the Belgian dates, or the dates of the Belgian races, are much better than the dates of the international races. It's going to be the race in Cabras that's going to be at the short end of the stick here. They're going to be missing the boat again, and then if the plug is pulled on that event, like with Val di Sole, be like, oh yeah, Italy, it's not just for cross, it's really like a Belgian thing. That's not true. And then they said, oh, we'll bundle it, the World Cup, they'll be nice for the Christmas period. They're not. There is a race in France in the middle of the Christmas period, and whilst that will be a great event, you also need to be realistic. The whole world, the whole cyclocross world comes to Belgium for Christmas cross. There are so many races. Everyone wants to do a race, the juniors are there, and now they need to go to Besançon in the middle. And what's the result? Puk Pietersen released her schedule today. She's not doing Besançon. Sven Nys said, well, I'm not too sure. We're mandated to send some riders to Besançon, but we'll see how we're on the standings. If we're not good in the standings, why would we go? It's a long trip, 8-hour drive, and it's Diegem the day after, and so, yeah, whatever. And again, which races are the ones that are hurting? It's the races that aren't in Belgium and the Netherlands. And it's so easy to predict. And I can already also tell you, the week after Dublin, there will be articles in the Belgian media. They'll be complaining about what a stupid transfer it is. And I'll leave it with that, because the more in-depth explanation is in our World Cup podcast. We went over it extensively when it was released. The thoughts are still the same, and it's just infuriating to see, because we both know what's going to happen now, Issam.
In what sense?
Well, I mean, in the sense of the complaining and what the UCI is going to say and what the riders are going to say and how they'll complain about Besançon being far away in the Christmas period and that transfer. Like, it's too predictable, and still it happens.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that is definitely going to be somewhat the scenario. We will be close to that for sure, and it's a shame. It's a difficult situation they're in as well. They haven't treated the races that had a chance to stay within the cycle of the World Cup to keep them in. And I think Flanders Classics for sure had an intent, and the intention was very good at the start of the reform. But they messed up along the way, and right now we are with sort of a half-half situation. It could improve, and I feel that the stories that we hear around Hungary and maybe some other things that could play up, there are chances, but the chances have to be taken. They have to be taken seriously. And if that doesn't work in the current environment and the current playing field that we have to become a race organizer, I think that they have to look to themselves and see what they could do different, because, right now we are in a situation which, as you said, it's just bad, and it has to improve, and hopefully it will, because I think it's for the greater good, and we have to wait and see. But as you said, we have talked about that extensively in that podcast, and it is a great listen. I think we really discussed a lot about that. So yeah, I think we can focus a little bit more now on the racing itself and the calendar and the first race of the World Cup, which is obviously in Antwerp.
Yeah, so I will link the post or the podcast in the show notes, and I'll also link the latest edition of Inside Cyclocross, which has a written version. Just before we go to Antwerp, I would still like to just briefly comment on something you said, because I agree that the solutions, it can improve, but there needs to be like an actual action plan to do so. And that action plan can either come from the UCI, which forces Flanders Classics to go more international and say like, no, we're not going to say 50% of the races can be in one country, but rather say 25, which I think is a very fair standard for a World Cup. And secondly, you need to look at how you protect these international organizers. The protected status of the weekend is one thing now, because now at least you won't have riders say, well, I'm not going to race Dublin because I'll race Boom the day before. I think it's a shame Boom isn't on the calendar. It's one of my favorite venues, but you get what I mean. I think it's good that something is being done, but there should be a bigger search. So we should be looking at how can the costs for maybe only the first year or maybe the first and second year be lowered for the organizers, so it's less risky for them to take on a risk. And that should be something that's only valid for the organizers outside of the Netherlands and Belgium. We should, of course, not be putting Dublin and Cabras, two ferry races, back to back. We should be looking at the dates to have a gap in the World Cup so riders can go on training camp. I think it's very normal that a series isn't every week. There's a lot of winter sports where there's breaks. In NFL, you have bye week. In European football, you have winter stop. You have interland breaks. So I think it's normal that nothing is completely continuous, and cyclocross should not necessarily want to be too different from that. Those are some solutions I came up with that weren't in the podcast we did in May from the top of my head. And then we'll go to Antwerp, Issam. Course nearly unchanged from last year. It's still on the new venue ever since it's been in the World Cup, with the city of Antwerp in the background. We have that start-finish straight into the bit of loose sand in the first corner, then that stupid bottleneck on the hill super early. So the start is quite decisive here. Let's go over the Dutch team first. Joris Nieuwenhuis is starting his season. Then, of course, with Lars van der Haar and Pim Ronhaar, they have two of the main riders of the season, although Ronhaar has been very inconsistent. So probably Van der Haar is the rider we should start talking about. How do you fancy his chances with the start being so important?
I think that his chances are how good his start will be. Of course, as you said, you pointed out, his start is not always the best, but he has the experience, and if there is not really, as you said, that bottleneck that you have with the hill, if he is not behind that and he's able to get through the first lap quite well, I think he can definitely pick up some places for sure, because it is a race where you can really find yourself going over the limit without really knowing, and then at a certain point it can, the lights will go out, and then before you know it, it's gonna be quite difficult getting through the sand and getting through several sections of the course, which are just it's fast, and it just when the lights go out, there is no recovery really, and it becomes difficult to maintain your position. So I think for someone like Van der Haar, he should normally kind of like this course. He would get through this course quite well. The start is going to be critical, but I feel with his experience, he's definitely going to be able to pick up some places and eventually get himself within top 5, top 3 and play a role in the race.
As you say, a lot depends on his start, and you're talking from the angle that his start will be bad, but I'm not necessarily sure his start will be bad, because we have seen him have good starts, even this season. So I think we might see him eager to improve on last weekend when he had two bad starts. We saw that, for instance, at the European Championships, when he was eager to make up for the bad starts he had in Overijse and also at the Koppenberg. So he might have a good start. He can start good. He's just a bit inconsistent in his starts. The same can be said for his trade teammate Thibaut Nys. They both have been somewhat inconsistent in getting going the first straightaway. We've seen Nys take the whole shot, I think, once. Has been in the front positions a few times. Also been further back, like in Merckx+. So I would say this course is going to make for a very entertaining race. It's quite hard to gap someone. Last year, behind Van der Poel and Van Aert, we saw a group. I mean, Van Aert was kind of in that group as well. So since the location change, I always associate it with sand, like a good sand cross, the sand along the Schelde, some running. But really, since the course changed, the dynamics of the course have changed. The sand doesn't play that big of a role. It's technical, so it will stretch out. It can be hard to move up. Maybe the grass gets a bit slippery. Maybe it doesn't. The weather has been quite bad the past few days. Rain, some snow even. But I don't know how muddy it really gets. A lot just flows right into the river right away. I would say it's a good course for an exciting race. Lots of riders in the mix, kind of like we saw last week. Van der Haar should definitely play a role. I'm not so sure about Ronhaar. It's not a good course for him. Nieuwenhuis is a big question mark. I saw him train in Lichtaert on Wednesday. I don't really have any conclusions based on that training session. And then the Belgian team, I mean, that's where all the other contenders come from. And we are obviously going to be looking, I think, at 3-4 riders, mainly Issam. Iserbiet, Zweek, Nijs, and Van der Putten. Would that be right? Those four with Van der Haar the biggest favorites?
I could agree with that. I think that Sveek is definitely someone that will go to Antwerp and think about Neil and think about Merckx Plus and be like, well, I can definitely do something here. But it's gonna be difficult for him. And in terms of Iserbyt has so far this season always has been playing somewhat of a role for a podium. So he will definitely, if everything goes his way in terms of no issues, no mechanicals, he will definitely play a role again in Antwerp, and he will be fighting for at least for the podium, and he will be motivated. And I think for Van Toornout it's gonna be the same thing. He's someone that also finds his way around this course normally, and if he has good legs, will definitely try to showcase that and be up there. So I think with those guys and also Thibaut, the guys that will do it, Van der Putten is a question mark in a way. It's definitely someone that could have a very good day there, but could also have some difficulties. It depends really on how the course will be, because as you said, it's a bit of a question mark how the course really will be with the circumstances, with the weather. The weather is a bit iffy at the moment, so we don't really know what we can expect on the Sunday, but it's definitely going to be the usual suspects that we have seen so far in the last couple of weeks. They will make it out, and as you said, the sand doesn't play that much of a role, so for Sveek, that is not going to be something that he can use in his advantage, but it will play somewhat of a role, and the small margins could maybe become eventually the things that will make someone victorious, and that will be interesting for sure, and someone should definitely make sure that the mistakes are not really there, and I think that eventually with good legs will determine who will be the winner.
One thing that will also play a crucial role is the final sand section, because if you remember last year, this section was reworked. It was put lower, or no, it was actually just the sea level had been super high, so the river in the Schelde was also super high, so it had swallowed away a large part of the beach which they normally ride on. So depending on the tide, the race there during the day was completely different. So in the morning, when the juniors rode, the tide was coming in, and you took a dive down through the loose sand and rode along the shore. But then as the U23 went, the tide had come in, and there was just this loose sand section. They didn't have that possibility to the same extent. But then when the elite went, the tide was going out again, so you drop down to the shore again. So depending on that situation there, that's a sand section that could be pivotal in the race, because if you recall 2 years ago, we saw big differences being made there. Also in terms of running skills, for most women that section was a run. You'll remember Issam, that video from Blanca Vash being completely exploded by the end, just walking at the end of the first lap. So that's something that can also play a role, and that will also just depend in what status, what's the quality of the sand there, what's the quality of the beach there, what has that done before. That's not something we can know even if we just look at the tides and what way do they put out the course there. That's something interesting, because if that sand section is there, then you do not want Laurens Sveek going into that first and the final lap, because if he goes into that first and the final lap, he is going to win, because he will ride to the end, because he is the Sandman. So that's something important to keep in mind. Positioning will be very crucial. I would, on this course, say I have faith in Sveek. I think he can win. He would be my favorite probably. I expect a close race, as I said. What I like about Sveek is that he's been going to Spain a lot. He has a house or apartment in Mallorca. So after his win in Niel, he went to Mallorca to do 3 days of training in the sun and then came back. He won in Merckx Plus, but then he said, well, I did some training work. I wasn't fresh enough. Sunday was a really bad day for me in Hamme. But that's okay. So I would expect him to be in decent form. I don't really expect to see him at the start of the Exact Cross in Kortrijk the day before. There are no start lists available for that race yet. So I would say Sveek is my favorite, and then closely followed by Nijs and Van der Putten.
That's interesting. I think that Sveik is an underdog, but I don't see him as a favorite because I think that this course will be. It will be an honest course, and I think that the ones with the best legs, despite the lack of skill in the sand, will eventually get on top. So I feel that the guys that are in shape at currently, which I would regard Van de Putte as one, Nice looks to be in good shape, but for some reason is not really getting it out in the in the last part of the race. So that will be interesting. And I think that Iserbyt is definitely someone that is going to be highly motivated. It's for him sort of a new start. The classification that is going to the basically is starting. I feel that he is going to be very motivated. He will be up there. I fancy an Iserbyt win, to be honest. I think that he will definitely be the man to beat, in my opinion. And Van de Putte will obviously be somewhere there, nice as well. And I think that will be a great battle to watch. If I would pick a winner, I think that Iserbyt has a very good chance. But I think it will be a very entertaining race with a nice battle that could end up with 2-3 riders till the end.
Yeah, it's interesting that you choose Iserbyt. He definitely made a decent impression in Hamme. Something I don't think we underlined enough in that podcast was the fact that he rode into a photographer when he crashed and really needed to spend a lot of effort. From there, we took the angle of, well, it kind of fits with him making a lot of mistakes this season, but that was clearly something that we need to rectify. So it's interesting that you go with him. I can see where you're coming from with that section around the hills. That's definitely something that suits Iserbyt well. Van Toerenhout can maybe play some team tactics, but I can't really see it happen with how things have been going. I think he'll be just off the podium. I think my podium will be Zweek, Nice, and then Van de Putte. They're very evenly matched. I don't see it happening for Gerben Kuipers and Toon Aerts. Kuipers has said he's hoping to really peak his form at the Christmas period. Can't really see it happen. I do think that Felipe Orts will factor in. The course is somewhat technical. There is a bunch of corners on that infield, also some straightaways. He's been on the podium a couple of times, but I don't think this course plays to his strengths enough to put him on the podium here. So, as said, my podium will be Zweek, Nice, and Van de Putte.
I will go for Iserbyt, Nice, Van de Putte. I think that will be my podium. And to be honest, I don't really have a clear favorite. Iserbyt is the guy that I think could win, but it's, with the men's category at the moment, we just got a couple of guys that are capable of winning, and I'm just looking forward to the racing there. I think it will be a nice watch for sure on the television.
Then the women's race. There we see Fem van Empel make a return. Her last race was the European Championships 3 weeks ago. She is coming back from a training camp. She will be starting with bib number 1 as the reigning world champion. And we should also be expecting a close race here, Issam. We've seen her battle before she left with Brandt and Alvarado. Do you think we'll get the same, or should we also consider other names?
No, I wouldn't consider any other names normally. Although I would definitely say that before this season, I would have said if Van Empel would have come back from training, I would have said that it's going to be Van Empel 1, and then we will see who's going to finish 2nd and 3rd. But right now, she really brought some doubt in the last couple of races in me in terms of how clear the victory will be, or if she actually is going to win. So I think it will be a bit closer than we normally think it would. But I feel that Van Empel is still most likely the one that is going to be the one to be beaten and is going to showcase her strengths in a way. And I feel that those weeks probably did her very good, and she will be in good shape and will try to bring home the victory. I think that Alvarado and Brandt for sure will have their strengths in this course, and they will make it difficult. But I honestly still think that Van Empel should normally, be victorious on a course like this.
we're coming to an important part of the season for Van Empel, because in the first part of the season we have talked a lot about her different approach, and she's banked on a different approach to come into better form later into the season. And now it's slowly time to see how much truth that holds and if the approach is working. Will she be in better form now than she was before? Maybe the first race is not really a good standard to go by, but you get what I mean. Like, we're in this period, and if she's going to be better than before, she should be stronger than before. She should be winning more races. She should be having less issues with dropping them on the power sections. If that's not the case, then she should maybe be worried about Pieterse coming back, because what if Pieterse reaches the same level as 2 years ago? Then it's going to be difficult for Van Empel to become world champion. So it's an important period for her. I would say that on this course we should consider Laura Verdomschot, because yes, the sand is not super crucial on the new course, but it still is there and it still plays a role. And I think that role in the women's race is always a bit bigger than in the men's race. So the relative difference for Verdomschot will be slightly bigger than the relative difference for Laurensweek. So last year, Verdomschot finished 5th here in Antwerp. And that was really the start of a strong period for her. Well, I think it kind of already started before, but it was a continuation of good results in other races. I recall she did decent in the Exactcross and Mol the day before in the sand, and then the next day she finished 5th here. And she continued that basically till the end of the season. 4th in Kokzijde, and then ultimately 5th at the World Championships. So we should consider her. And I think that on this course, I would still say, okay, the tiredness is maybe setting in. Last weekend wasn't the best weekend. Maybe just one more big push before you go to Spain for training. But the sand will help her, whereas it will hamper Casasola. We saw in Merckxplas and also in Ruddervoorde that Casasola struggles quite a bit with the sand. And I'm not going to say it will be as extreme as we have seen, for instance, with Backstedt before. She also struggles with the sand. So I would say that Verdomschot can maybe play for the podium if one of the top 3 riders, Van Empel, Brandt and Alvarado, has a bad day. But it will be difficult. I think especially Alvarado is dangerous on this course. Brandt, she will have her strength sections, but I have a tough time betting against Alvarado this weekend based on her grade last week. I mean, it's hard to look by those 3 1s behind her name in the last 3 results.
Yeah, she's on a roll at the moment. I feel that she's definitely having the momentum. The shape looks to be good, and the results speaks for themselves. So she will definitely be. She will get a course that where she can definitely play some of her strengths. As I said, it's, to be honest, it's more the question with what form will Van Empel return. Will Van Empel be able to reach a level that we somewhat more expect from her, or will she not return in? Will she return in a similar shape she went away? And in that case, it could be a close battle, and maybe even a battle that she could lose. It's gonna be interesting. And just to go on about Verdomschot, I think that Verdomschot definitely has a shot for a good top 5 finish, but I don't know. It's difficult to say how her shape will affect her abilities in the sand, because for one part, definitely you need to have the skills, but you also need to have some good legs, because Antwerp is definitely a course where you're not only having to rely on your sand skills, but it's more than that. You need to have the legs to get through the rest of the course, and I think that is what I feel is missing at the moment for Verdomschot. So that's why I didn't really mention her. But of course, if we talk about the sand, Verdomschot is very good, negotiating it, and that will definitely help her out if it will play a crucial role. So it's going to be an interesting race at the women's side. I think that there will be less parties at the front fighting for the podium compared to the men. But it's still going to be a lot of questions before we enter, and a lot of those questions will be answered after the race.
I mean, like I said last week, it's good to see everything become a bit more packed in the women's field. The gaps are probably going to be bigger, like you say, but Vash is now also racing. I don't really have high expectations for her on this course, but it will be interesting to see how she can do in potentially a muddy race like Dublin or in Namur. That should be a really good course for her. So I look forward to that. On this course, I would want to say Marie Schreiber has an outside chance of the podium. As said, I already went over my top three, Alvarado, Brandt and Van Empel. Behind that, I see a bigger group of riders. I already mentioned for Donschot. I will add Schreiber to that list, and I will also add Van der Heijden to that list, although Van der Heijden hasn't been having the best season. Backstedt, again, not a good course for her, but it is a good course for Schreiber. So, who knows? She was quite strong last weekend with a third and a sixth. She can get things together here on the day. Who knows? Maybe she can cause an upset and even clinch a podium. I say it with very, very little optimism, but I would say she has an outside chance. I fancy her chances on a course like Antwerp. It might be one of the better races for her on the circuit.
I agree. I think that is definitely, she will get a good chance on a very good result, and the form is there, and she will definitely have. She bounced somewhat back from that somewhat disappointing result at the European Championships. Trained a little, came back strong, looks to be in good shape, and can really. I think she can somewhat surprise us and get herself within the top 5, and I don't even know if you can really call that a surprise at this point. She has the legs to do so, and she will get a course where she can find sections where she can use that strength to her advantage. The start will definitely not be an issue for Schreiber, most likely, and if that is the case, it's gonna be interesting to see what she will do. But she will definitely be someone to look out for a top 5 for sure.
Well, and as we went over before, the start is quite important in this race because there's that hill super early, and that's a big bottleneck. So where in the men's race we were talking about, well, it can hurt riders who have a bad start, we can also turn that around and say it will benefit riders who have a good start. And normally we can expect Schreiber, who will be starting on the first row, to have the best start. We can almost expect her to have the whole shot because she's really punchy off the line. So if she goes through there first, there's going to be a jam behind, and riders will be caught behind. Brandt this year has also not had the best starts. We need to be realistic about that. We've seen her many times come back from 8th or 10th after the start. She cannot permit to have a start like that here in Antwerp. She needs to be within the first 5-6 going into that first hill, because as soon as you go under that bridge, that's pretty much where you're going to be. You can maybe overtake 1 or 2 riders into the corner, but then you're up on the hill. So that's something that will definitely help Schreiber on this course. And then we saw in Merckxplas what happens if she can keep it up. I wouldn't go as far as predicting her to take a podium, but I definitely think she can feature. I like what I've seen so far, apart from the tactics at the European Championships. Think some other names I'm interested in, but not necessarily for a top 10, are Celia Géry and Imogen Wolf. I'm curious to see how they will do, what their level will be like. Kat Ferguson will be coming back to cross later. She's been training in Spain with Imogen Wolf quite a bit. So I'm quite excited to see how these young talents do. And I'll let you go first for the podium prediction, unless you have any other names you would like to cover.
Yeah, I saw Sidney McGill as well on the start list, so that will be interesting as well. And I think the names that you mentioned with the Géry and Wolf is also, I will be looking at those as well for, what in terms of results, what they will be, will they produce in terms of performance. And that will obviously be very interesting because the races at the elites, it's a little different. It could sometimes you see a result and it has a bigger story than you would have thought, and you need to take that in perspective. But I feel that is definitely going to be interesting to follow. And in terms of a podium, I would say that I will stick with Van Empel. I think that Van Empel will come back strong and will take the victory in ahead of Alvarado and third for Brandt.
I will turn that top two around and go with Alvarado ahead of Van Empel and Brandt for the reasons I just explained. Good. I think good coverage. I think we did a good job in not going too long about the World Cup reforms. If you hear us go off mic sometimes, we can just go for hours talking about cross. Our struggle is always to keep it relatively short for these podcasts, so just over the 35-minute mark should be a good podcast. We'll be back with this weekend covering for sure the World Cup in Antwerp. Depending on the start list and the race scenarios, we might also cover the Exactcross in Kortrijk, but if nobody is there or it's quite straightforward and boring, we'll just dedicate a short section to it just because it's on TV, and an Exactcross for us isn't really a reason to cover it because we also don't cover the Czech and French races that are on TV with equal start lists. Perhaps I have time to drop a special episode on Friday, but that might be pushed to next week, so stay tuned for that. Issam, thank you again for being here, and we will be back this weekend. Thanks everyone, goodbye.